Capitol Police, how President Joe Biden and congressional leaders are honoring a fallen officer. Coronavirus crisis, what prompted regulators to interrupt the rollout of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Military buildup, why NATO is growing more concerned about Russia's threat to Ukraine. And Vatican summit, learn about the theology of the priesthood during our report from Rome. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. For the second time in less than 3 months, mourners honor a fallen police officer in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. This time, William Evans, who, like Brian Sicknick before him, is lying in honor inside the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, Tracy, Officer William Evans died on April 2nd, just outside the Capitol Hill here after a man intentionally rammed his car into a barricade. Now, during today's ceremony, family of Evans listened to President Joe Biden talk about the ultimate sacrifice he made. The casket of 18-year veteran Officer William Billy Evans was carried up the Capitol steps. Inside the Capitol, Evans' 9-year-old son Logan wore his father's police hat, accompanied by his 7-year-old sister Abigail. Their mom and Evans' mother were by their side. Congressional leaders spoke about the 41-year-old's sense of humor, his Catholic faith, and how he was always willing to help.
Those of you who remember Billy need to speak his name. Tell his stories, tell his jokes, even the bad ones, especially the bad ones, to keep his memory alive.
Officer Evans, a Catholic, was killed on Good Friday, the saddest day of the year for many people of faith.
Officer Evans is the 6th officer to die in the line of duty since the Capitol Police Force was established nearly 2 centuries ago. President Joe Biden touched on the loss of a child, a tragedy he says he's gone through twice in his life.
My prayer for you is that moment of the smile comes before the tear, quicker than longer.
I once was lost, but now I'm found.
We thank you in the midst of our grief for the courageous life and legacy of Officer William Evans.
Also in attendance for today's ceremony was Officer Ken Schaefer. That was the officer, the other one, who was injured in that attack. Now he is still off duty. Reporting from the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the White House responds to reports of rare but potentially dangerous side effects associated with the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. The government issued a pause in its use. Officials are investigating 6 cases of blood clots, all involving women between the ages of 18 and 48 years old, including one who died. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, to be very clear, of the nearly 7 million Johnson & Johnson doses administered so far in the U.S., the vast majority have seen no or only mild side effects. But tonight, that particular vaccine is no longer going into American arms, at least for now.
Dr. Anthony Fauci lays out what's going on with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
This is a really rare event. If you look at what we know so far, there have been 6 out of the 6.85 million doses, which is less than 1 in a million.
The new health concerns follow pro-life alarms since the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was made from abortion-derived cells. The church approves it only if you could not find a better alternative. Still, the vaccine has already been administered to millions of Americans. COVID-19 response coordinator Jeff Zients also spoke at the press briefing.
So we have more than enough supply of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines to continue the current pace of about 3 million shots per day.
Former President Donald Trump blasts the health regulator's decision to pause. In a scathing rebuke, he writes, the Biden administration did a terrible disservice to people throughout the world by allowing the FDA and CDC to call a pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. The results of this vaccine have been extraordinary, but now its reputation will be permanently challenged.
Anyway, we got a lot to talk about.
And also at the White House today, Vice President Kamala Harris joined the president for a White House meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus. They're covering issues like voting rights, racial equity, and infrastructure, the focus of the president's American Jobs Plan.
Now back to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine pause. It is not a mandate, but most states will likely follow suit. Now, doctors can still administer it to patients if they feel that's the best course of action. And finally, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are not impacted at all by this pause. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
And again, as we just heard from Owen, the FDA and CDC are investigating cases of rare and severe blood clots reported from that Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. Joining us now to talk more about this is Dr. Joseph Meaney, president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Dr. Meaney, thank you so much for joining us today. How do you think this news will impact the overall distribution and supply of COVID-19 vaccines? And exactly what does it mean to pause a particular vaccine?
Sure. So hopefully it will not have too big of an impact, but it is, important. I think the principle of precaution is involved here. If there are several people who have unexplained severe side effects and they could be linked to the vaccine, and 6 women, for instance, that does seem like something that needs to be investigated, and that does justify doing a pause in rolling it out.
As we mentioned, the reason for concern with this particular vaccine is due to rare and severe blood clots known as cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, or CVST. What more can you tell us about this type of blood clot and really why it's so worrisome?
Sure. Well, it's very rare, but it can cause deadly side effects, particularly if it happens in the brain, but also if it happens for the lungs. So it's something that is very rare in the general population. Only 1 in a million or so would have it, and so they're trying to find out if this is going to be a problem with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. There was also concerns with the AstraZeneca vaccine of a similar nature in Europe. So I think there is something to be investigated there, and it seems like it might affect younger people rather than older people.
Yeah, as we mentioned many times, these reactions are really rare. But that being said, what should people look out for if they've had this vaccine when it comes to some warning signs?
Sure. So it seems like it would happen within just a few days. 6 to 13 days is what was the case for these 6 cases that happened. And it's basically, severe headaches, abdominal pain, pain in the arms or legs. Those would be kind of things to be worried about, and to maybe check with your doctor, particularly in that window of a few weeks after the vaccine.
I want to switch gears here just a little bit. These rare blood clots really aren't the only concern with this J&J vaccine. As we know, there are also some ethical concerns. You and I discussed this before. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, the problem with the Johnson & Johnson and the Oxford AstraZeneca is that both of these were grown in abortion-derived cell lines. So that's kind of the worst ethical profile in terms of links to abortion that a vaccine can have. And, it's not the case with the Pfizer and Moderna, which were only tested using abortion-derived cell lines. So it's clearly, unfortunate because it's not necessary in any way to grow a vaccine in that kind of cell line. And yet the manufacturers chose to do so. So, we're very unhappy that there isn't a completely ethical option that has no connection to abortion currently available.
Well, Dr. Meaney, thank you so much for coming on and weighing in on this for us. We really appreciate it. Dr. Joseph Meaney, president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center.
You're very welcome.
Well, officials with the FDA announced women seeking an abortion pill will not be required to visit a doctor's office or clinic during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a reversal of a policy put into place under the Trump administration. Jeannie Mancini, president of the pro-life group March for Life, put out a statement today regarding the change, saying, quote, "With this action, the Biden administration has made it clear that it will prioritize abortion over women's safety, allowing unsupervised chemical abortions via telemedicine without requiring timely access to medical care will put women in grave danger." An Ohio law which prohibits abortions when there is a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome may now take effect. The 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals narrowly ruled to lift a lower court stay on the 2017 law. The president of Ohio Right to Life is elated with today's decision. NATO's Secretary General wants Russia to withdraw its forces from Ukraine's border. Jens Stoltenberg calls their presence unjustified, unexplained, and deeply concerning.
Russia must end this military buildup in and around Ukraine, stop its provocations, and de-escalate immediately.
Stoltenberg met with Ukraine's foreign minister and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. President Biden also spoke directly with President Putin about those disputed deployments. Iran's foreign minister is accusing Israel of orchestrating sabotage at its Natanz nuclear facility, and he vowed revenge. Separately, Iran says it will begin enriching uranium up to 60% purity after the attack. Weapons grade is 90% purity. Treated radioactive water from Japan's damaged nuclear plant may be released into the Pacific. The target date is 2 years from now, pending approval. Storage capacity tops off within a year. China and South Korea dispute claims of safety, as do local residents and fisheries. The tainted water has cooled the Fukushima plant after an earthquake and tsunami back in 2011. The Muslim penitential month of Ramadan has begun. Globally, Muslims participate in dawn to dusk fasting and lengthy prayers in mosques. In Mecca, Muslims perform socially distant rituals. This year, coronavirus restrictions will vary according to governments of different Muslim majority countries. Coming up, school shooting, where officers confronted a suspect and what happened next. And international religious freedom, where the Biden administration stands on the issue. A global expert on religious freedom is concerned about a shift in policy for current U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken compared to the Trump administration. Shea, the director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, writes in the National Review, the secretary is bowing to trends in domestic partisan political fashions, not responding to realities in a world where the need to oppose religious persecution has become ever more urgent. Nina Shea joins us now. Nina, welcome back. Always great to be with you. Talk to us about this change in the policy under Secretary Blinken compared to the State Department under former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. What's the major difference here?
Well, the major difference is that the Secretary Blinken of the Biden administration is downplaying religious freedom. He's demoting it. It was a priority concern in foreign policy under the Secretary Pompeo and the Trump administration, and now he is making it in a very hidden way. He's making it co-equal. Now, what that means is that they get a demotion, and it means that in reality, religious freedom will probably not get much funding for programming. It will not be high on the agenda in bilateral meetings with persecutors, governments like China or Turkey that persecute religious believers. So, or Iran. So it's downplaying. It's a demotion of religious freedom.
Nina, what kind of impact will this have on the millions of people around the world who are victims of religious persecution?
Well, I think that they will experience emboldened tyrants who hear the words that, reading between the lines, hearing the words that he is, what Secretary Blinken said is that he's repudiating the views of the prior administration on human rights, those views being religious freedom, because he pointed to a commission that focused to some extent on religious freedom and how it should be a primacy for American values and traditions and history and law. So plus international obligations. It's actually in the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, which we adhere to. So the tyrants will hear this, the persecutors will hear this, they will feel emboldened, and the people will suffer. The religious minorities around the world, whether it's in northern Nigeria or in China, throughout China, or in the Middle East, will be deprived of needed projects and programming and support and American support. There's no one that speaks up for them. There's no country that speaks up for them. These are minorities, these Christians and Yazidis and Uyghur Muslims, Rohingya Muslims. They live in countries where they are minorities and they don't have anyone on the world stage that really speaks up for them, except the United States. So it's going to be devastating for them.
Yeah.
I think we'll see. This is a time in our global history where religious persecution is extremely severe and it's intensifying. Millions of people are suffering genocide, religious genocide, in China right now, and also with the Uyghur Muslims, but also. We just had a designation of genocide a few years ago for the ISIS genocide of Christians and Yazidis in Nineveh, Iraq, which you've talked about on this program many times. So it's a very common, unfortunately common pattern we're seeing. It's one of the worst human rights violations in terms of demographics in the world today is religious persecution.
Yeah, it's very, very concerning. We have about a minute left, Nina, but I do want to talk to you about this. I know you wrote about Secretary Blinken's intent to treat international religious freedom as co-equal. You sort of mentioned that too before, to things like so-called abortion rights and also LGBTQ policies. What's the danger there? Talk about that and the impact of this change.
Well, I think when he's signaling is that he is going to put them on, he's going to elevate those issues. And these are the rights that he is talking about. And he's going to be pushing them and funding them through USAID, which, by the way, has $25 billion annually that it gives in aid. So it's going to be putting it towards those issues. It's already canceled a whole raft of programs for persecuted religious believers, people who either are facing genocide or are recovering from genocide or trying to stave off genocide by early warning systems in Nigeria. So this is going to be the trade-off.
Well, Nina, thank you so much for your time. I wish we had more time to talk to you, but unfortunately we have to leave it right there. Nina Shea, Director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, the Bishop of the Diocese of Knoxville, Tennessee, is demanding positive solutions to gun violence after a fatal shooting at an area high school yesterday. The suspect is dead and an officer injured following the shooting at Austin East High School. The officers responded to the school after reports of a man who was possibly armed inside. As officers approached the suspect, shots were fired. In a statement, Bishop Richard Sticka writes in part, "As a nation, we must commit ourselves to work to turn away from violence and find real solutions that lead us to love, compassion, and decency." Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of the Bishop of the Diocese of Crookston, Minnesota. Bishop Michael Hopner was the subject of 2 church investigations after he was accused of mishandling cases of priests accused of sexual misconduct. The Holy Father appointed the Bishop Emeritus of Des Moines, Iowa, Bishop Richard Pates, to lead the diocese until a new bishop is named. Up next, report from Rome. How the Vatican is focusing on the theology of the priesthood. And bringing art to life. How Michelangelo's David is being duplicated in 3D. Today marks 35 years since Pope St. John Paul II visited the synagogue in Rome, the first pope to ever visit a Jewish temple. To the Jewish community, he said, quote, "You are our dearly beloved brothers, our older brothers." While the Vatican announces preparations for a symposium on the priesthood. The meetings will touch on questions including priestly celibacy, dwindling vocations, and the role of women in the church, and will take place in February 2022. The church will celebrate vocations this Sunday on April 25th. Father Sergio Tapia-Velasco from the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross joins us now from Rome. He collaborates with the university's Center of Priestly Formation. Father, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Talk to us about the symposium, why it's important to reflect on the theology of the priesthood.
Hello, Tracy. Thank you for the invitation. I think this symposium is just a great chance that the church now has thought for all of us, because we are passing, and I think it's important to understand that we're passing through a kind of crisis in the vocations for priesthood in different parts of the world, mainly in Europe and in some cases in America also. And that is why the church has thought that we need to reflect more on the full relationship of the entire church, not only the priests, but the whole people of God. We all have this priestly vocation in a certain sense, because we all, through baptism, have received the call for being priests with Christ. And I think it's just a great opportunity for us to continue the reflection that, in a certain sense, has started with the previous synods that the church has had on the family, on youngsters, and recently on Amazonia.
Father, what would you like to see as the outcome to these meetings?
What we will expect is probably new solutions for formation of the priests, new ways to help priests in their work, in the different pastoral tasks that they face, because I think that in many cases we have asked priests to work in fields that actually could perfectly fit lay people. Sometimes we have, let's say, priests working as managers, organizing the work of the for example, of the social aid of the church in different parts, and probably that could be done by a layman or a laywoman, and leave the priests only for their sacramental purpose. That is the main thing that we have been asked through our ordination.
Well, Father, thank you so much for your time today and talking to us about this important subject. Father Sergio Tapia-Velasco from the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
Our digital 3D technology has achieved a replica of Michelangelo's masterpiece, the Statue of David. The new twin began with 40 hours of photographic scanning, then intricate computerized mathematics. The restorers applied a mixture of resin and marble powder to duplicate the statue's texture. The original David still remains in a Florence museum. David's twin now occupies the original spot in a plaza in Florence. It awaits a voyage to Dubai later this year for the coronavirus-delayed Expo 2020. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.